still as the prison like you can be beheaded. He will go
Hello? Test? Test, are we good? We good? All right. Hi. Good evening, everyone. For the 11th time, this is Web Design DeCal, and this is actually the final lecture, which kind of makes me a little bit sad. I understand that there's like a smaller group today, I guess, probably because a lot of people left for Thanksgiving break. I don't blame them. I mean, we only have like 3 days this week. But you know, if you could, like, if you want to, you could just like come a little closer, so we're like more of a little tight-knit group, so we can, yeah, so we can, if you want to. But I don't know, it'd be nice for me. But anyway, there are a couple things I want to talk about before we dive into the lecture today. First of all, homework 8. What do you guys think about homework 8? Let's get like a thumbs up, like all the way up if you're like feeling really good about it, and like down if you really don't feel good about it, and like somewhere in between if you, okay. All right, I'm getting the sense it's like sort of all over the place. Is it, well, I guess it might be really particular from person to person, but I think, I thought it was really fun homework. I think it's like, it covers over like a lot of stuff that I would definitely want to go over, but it's going to be a little bit tough this week to answer your questions because it's due this Thursday, and of course, like everyone's pretty much gone come Wednesday. So if you do have questions, try to like get them on Piazza as early as you can, because obviously there's no office hours between now and when it's due. So yeah, we'll be active on office hours, and in the worst case, like I'm actually willing to go on Google Hangouts with you, and we can walk through whatever problem you have if it comes to that. But I think it's probably pretty manageable. So yeah, just come let us know after class too if you're still struggling. So this lecture, even though a lot of people may not be here, I hope you're watching on the live webcast because this is actually relatively important. And the reason that it's really important is just the first line here, deploying to GitHub. So the final project will not be turned in on the portal like everything else you've turned in this class before. It'll actually be slightly different. It'll be on a Google form. And one of the fields on the Google form when you're turning in your final project is what's the URL for your final project. So it's not like give us a URL for the zip file of your project. It'll actually be on the web when we accept it. So basically, it has to be deployed onto an actual site, onto an actual server for everyone to see. The reason for this is that A, it's more easy for us to just sort of like scan them all, and we can just check the URLs. And secondly, we're the web design decal, so we might as well use the web so that your site is not just confined locally to your own computer, but it's like everyone can see it. And so far, this whole class, we've done everything locally, but we're going to show you today in a very involved programming hands-on how to put it online using something called GitHub. So just super important that happens, so that's why this lecture portion is going to be condensed a little bit, so that way you know how to deploy to the web. Did I cover everything? Yeah. Oh, great point. Okay, so do you have to use GitHub to deploy your site? The answer is no. It's the way that we're obviously going to show you, but there are other ways you could do it if you want to use Heroku or WebFaction or any other kind of service that does similar things. You could, so long as you have a URL that you can put into that field. Because if your URL doesn't work or you don't supply a URL, it's like you didn't do the project, like it would be a zero. So we wouldn't want to have that happen to anyone. And so, yeah, be sure to learn or know how to deploy. Okay, so in this last programming lecture, I just want to go over real quick, just sort of recap everything we went over in jQuery within our limited time. I want to emphasize again that this is not the entire list of all the methods you can do in jQuery. This is actually just a small subset of the things that we found most important for making things happen using jQuery. But just looking at this cheat sheet here, does anyone have any questions about any one of these in particular? Because I'd be happy to go over like what it is or why you would use it or something like that. But this is essentially the past 3 lectures on one slide. I hope it's fairly clear what each of these did. And again, in the bottom right corner, there's always the jQuery API link. So always go to that in case there's something else you want to see. Kevin, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, we didn't really go over like settings
Sure. Sure, yeah. So I might have gone through that a little fast, but in terms of setting content, so I guess you're referring to the top left box there. The thing is that like in those parentheses, the way you set content is you just put something in there. So for example, if you wanted to reset the text in some element, you would just do .text, and then in the parentheses you put like quotes, some new string, right? And that new string would basically replace whatever was in that old element. So that's how you set, yeah. It's using the same stuff. Good question. Is there any other questions about anything else here? Yeah.
How would you append more? How would you inject HTML?
Injecting HTML?
Yeah.
Okay. So do you mean like changing the actual HTML, like using .html, or do you mean like appending and prepend?
Appending, yeah.
Sure. I mean, I guess since it's not up here, like the obvious thing to do would probably go Google, do like jQuery append HTML, and what that would take you to, probably in the first link or so, would probably be the jQuery API, which is there's a .append method in jQuery, so you can actually inject HTML. So yeah. Okay. All right. The thing is though, like we don't necessarily have to start from scratch every time we want to build something, and I think after years of there being web developers out there. More likely than not, the idea that you have, or at least portions of that idea, have been implemented by other people. And so generally these are open sourced in what's called a plugin. And jQuery has a ton of plugins, so we're going to be going over our top 3 favorite plugins for you. Secondly, we'll talk about just terminology in terms of deploying to the web, just so you're not totally confused. If you don't know what GitHub is, I'll answer what that is in that part of this the lecture. And finally, I just want to recommend a couple things to you after this class, and like what to look into in terms of web development to continue your web development adventure. So those are 3 things we're going to be talking about today. So again, like, there are really common elements that people put on their sites that people just, they say like, oh, I've done this like a ton of times. My friend who also does web development also happened to want say a jQuery form, for example. And so like, because it's done so often, like I feel like I have the best solution. So what if I just open source it? In other words, I just put it out there on the web, and people can basically use it as long as they attribute me or some kind of licensing agreement. But basically, I'm just putting out my solution for something. And so thankfully, this means like we don't have to reinvent the wheel every time because some things are just done for us. And so here are our 3 favorite plugins. And these are all Googleable, so you can always look for these, or you can always go back to these slides, because these are all like reference material. But they do various things. The first one is called Masonry, and this is what we call the Pinterest UI. So how many people have used Pinterest in here? Or at least know what it looks like? Okay. Yeah, so a fair number of people know what Pinterest looks like at least. And Pinterest, as you know, like it's not every tile of content is the exact same size. So not just a bunch of squares that's totally uniform. It's actually like mix and match in all over the place, which is really interesting. So like, you think about this, and now that you have a much better idea of like how something like this would be implemented, you think about this and you're like, wow, like that either sounds like it took a ton of like unique IDs because each rectangle seems to be different from the other, and that took like I don't know how you would do that. Like, as content coming in, are you like styling it? Like how does that work? Certainly not that, because that's like not scalable at all. But instead you use some jQuery magic that is in the form of this plugin, and you can just it's actually really simple. So why would you use Masonry? Suppose you have like a ton of content that is just sort of modular. You like a lot of little pieces of content. Let's say you're doing your portfolio site, and you happen to be an artist that has like hundreds, or you don't even need hundreds, but like just a lot of stuff, and you want to display it in a really cool, unique way. One way is going with the jQuery route, or the Masonry route, where every one of your projects has like one tile, right? And then it would just be displayed something like this. So if you were to do this without Masonry, it would look something like what's on the left here, where it's just, everything's sort of horizontally aligned, right? You're just probably doing float left. But after Masonry, it just sort of moves things where they could fill in space, and then you have this much more unique sort of hodgepodge of divs. And it's actually really easy to do. And the way you can actually find out how it's done on on their site. But basically, what you do is when you go onto the site that's linked here at the top, what you can do is you download Masonry, and what Masonry really is just a program, a jQuery program, and then you just include it in your HTML just like you would any other JavaScript thing, and then you just follow the documentation, and that's essentially it. The same goes for the second plugin that we want to talk about today, and it's something called waypoints. This is actually really kind of relevant to the scroll that I was talking about so much last lecture. How like now that we know how to like determine how far away we are from the top of the page and such. Now we get actually extra cool things if we just use waypoints. So I just want to show you the website that offers waypoints here. So basically, if you're doing a one-page site, I highly recommend using waypoints because it basically allows you to do things it would do it in a way that's like a lot sort of cleaner to look at. So, for example, if you want a sticky nav bar, which is a nav bar that sort of follows you, just notice how this bar here just follows along, but up here its position was something different, probably absolutely positioned within this relative container, and then upon hitting this point, it probably changed to position fixed. And so this can actually easily be done with sort of one line of code using waypoints. So that's definite advantage. Another thing, if you've ever wondered, like, how would I implement a sort of infinite scroll type thing where it's like you're looking at things and like it never seems to end because you just have a lot of it, like if you're on Tumblr or something like that. And so this allows for an easy solution for this to happen. And yeah, a bunch of various other things, but basically, just with like a few lines of code, you can basically use waypoints to help you out with your one-page site, and it'd be easier than ever to implement. And of course, the way you would do that in your HTML is you have jQuery and waypoints first, because it's an error if you do it otherwise. Like if you have your own script in front, then it won't know what you're referencing. So put your own script at the bottom, and then just read the documentation. That's essentially how easy it is to use it. So I just went through the effort of just like showing you like what the documentation actually says. Documentation, by the way, in case you're not familiar, is just basically a set of instructions of how to use it. In this case, it kind of looks just like our old jQuery, right? Except instead of .click or .hover, we have this .waypoint, which is unique, of course, only after you have imported waypoints. And here's just some examples of like what it looks like when you're 100 pixels from the top, for instance. Then it's just like a separate argument. But this is all directly from them, nothing too unique here. In case you've also ever wanted to know how you get photo sliders. So photo sliders being like websites that have this sort of automatic sliding thing here, right? But then there are also these little circles that basically take you to whichever one you want to go to. If you ever wondered, like, how do I do that? You could certainly implement it yourself from scratch. You know, like you can imagine if you had just photos that basically what you're doing in the homework, right? Except that you have some sort of timer that's going, so that way it happens automatically. And you have like 4 little circle divs here that are all horizontally aligned. Like you can imagine the details of how this would be implemented, or you could just use this photo slider, which makes it all like much simpler. And the way it works is it does it all based on an unordered list. So you basically put every photo you want in your slider in an unordered list, and then voila, like that's essentially all you need to do. And you also, I guess, need a little bit of jQuery too, but basically, this is the example they provide. You got an unordered list. This is the very bare bones CSS. And like literally, basically one line of jQuery will get you a photo slider. This is, of course, assuming that you imported the JS file. Yeah.
Sorry, you remind me of a question I had for a long time.
Oh, okay.
Back in my head.
All
How
right.
do you implement time-based events, like a timer, like you said, in JavaScript? Like, I know if that's like happens, like the code gets executed automatically, but how do you do that with those timer-based events? So like after 5 seconds that you're viewing the page, then do this action.
Yeah. Yeah, so this would probably relate into the set timeout function that we talked about for, like, Sean talked about this for his animations. In that case, it was just to avoid like having events happen too early because like he had a 0.3-second transition time, right? So essentially, yeah, just if you really want to set some amount of time, I think set timeout would probably be the best way to go. Yeah.
There's also a set interval function, so you can like set an interval and have something happen over that interval repeatedly. Perfect.
Yeah. There you go. Also, so again, like one of the drawbacks you might be thinking about like plugins is like, all right, so here's a bunch of code that I'm sort of bringing in. How do I know what's going on? And that's actually one drawback is like sometimes you actually really don't know what's going on because it's not your code. The way they try to consolidate this or try to make this better is that like in this case, you can actually import custom things. Well, not import custom things, rather. Let me say this better. Basically, they provide arguments of things that you can customize. So already within their program, they already take into account like, what if you don't like the speed at which it changes? You can change, that's a value that you can change. Same with like the amount of delay for each one, et cetera, et cetera. So everything is still sort of customizable, but you know, if you really wanted something that they didn't have an option for, you're kind of out of luck. You'd have to, I don't know, perhaps email the developer or perhaps just make it yourself from scratch. But that's sort of one of the limitations with plugins. Another limitation is that, you know, there's no free lunch, right? When it comes to like adding more JavaScript, we haven't really talked about performance in this class, and it's kind of strange actually if you didn't think about it to think that a website has performance, like it's not actually like going anywhere. But in terms of like performance, aka how long a website takes to load, loading in more stuff, as you might imagine, takes more time. So like if you imagine like here's you and here's wherever your server is, then like basically a light website or something that doesn't take much will just take like one trip to the other server and then back. But if you have like a ton of stuff, like you have like a giant image that needs to be sort of decoded into something else, or like maybe a really heavy video, or a lot of JavaScript, then like it's going to have to take multiple trips, and that just takes up time. So like obviously the sites that you use like really commonly have like dozens of like really good engineers that like their whole jobs are just making sure performance is great. So when you think about like, how come my static site like locally takes forever to load up all my images, but then Facebook for some reason like has like way more than I do, but everything loads like that. You know, Facebook hires a lot of talent. Like that's literally their whole jobs to like maximize website performance. And so they probably don't use plugins necessarily because they have people in-house who can do this, but like way more efficiently. So, you know, just keep that in mind, I guess. If you ever, somewhere down the line, find yourself working on a really non-trivially large application, like maybe the next Facebook, for instance, then, you know, think about performance when it comes to, like, when you have, like, a bunch of people visiting your site. Like, you want them to have a great experience, and it starts with good loading times. Questions about anything I said about the plugins? There are also certainly more than the 3 that we mentioned, but these are the ones that like we find ourselves coming back to over and over again to do stuff. Okay. So like this lecture is like deploying to GitHub, but what does it mean to deploy necessarily? So I actually hand-made these graphics in Keynote. And essentially, this is what we've been doing this entire time so far in the web decal. That's your machine, and you know, you're coding up your own static little documents on your machine, and you're locally hosting your own site. That's why, like, if your friend next to you with a computer like puts in exactly what's in your URL bar, they're not going to get what you have because it's literally just hosted on your own machine. We don't want that. We obviously want something like myname.com, or if you use GitHub Pages, right out of the box, your URL is going to be something, actually your username.github.io. Obviously, that's not necessarily the URL you want. You'd rather have, you know, yourname.com. There's ways of getting around that I'm going to get to shortly, but just for now, like right when you're done with the GitHub step, you get your username at github.github.io. That's going to be your URL. And in this case, like it's not just your machine that can see it, but literally anyone who has this URL, anyone with an internet connection can see your web page. So, you know, that's the power of the internet right there. Like it was just one user, which was you, to however, like, what, 200, 3 billion people on the web can now see it. So what is GitHub? Who knows what GitHub is, or like has an inkling of an idea? Okay, cool, awesome. So I guess you guys already know what GitHub is. At first, like I heard like, I remember when I was like starting to learn all this stuff for the first time, and I was like, I heard like 3 or 4 different things of what GitHub was, and I was so confused initially. So here's like my best way to try to like explain what I believe GitHub to be. And the best way I can do it is, I guess, through analogy. So when you think about other kinds of engineering, like not software engineering, like what we're doing, but other kinds of engineering, it's really easy for them if they're, say, building rockets, right? Because rockets are sort of huge, and it's one person's job just to focus on like the fins, another person's like on the engines, and like basically everyone can just like work on it at the same time. Like in your mind, you can imagine a bunch of workers on this rocket laid down here, and they can work at the same time, and that's no problem. But something that you might have taken for granted is like, how do like a bunch of software engineers work on the same piece of software at the same time? Do you think that like, you know, Facebook employs some like 1,000 number of engineers? Do you think that they just, you know, like all stand behind one guy and they make recommendations like, oh, you missed an apostrophe there, you know what I'm saying? Or like obviously that's not what they do. Somehow they've got to be able to build software at the same time. Do they use something like Google Docs, where like, you know, as you're writing stuff like in real time, it's like getting deleted and edited at the same time? No, they don't. No, they don't. That might be the future, or in the near future perhaps, but they don't. Yeah, it's a real tough question, because like if people are working on the same piece of software at the same time, like what if one person edits some line whereas another person deletes that line? Like what happens to that line? And really, this is all resolved in something called version control. And it is just as it sounds. Like, what version of the software are we on? And how can we sort of control it so that we don't have like major clashes? Like, I didn't want like all this to be edited. You edited it. You know, like this can all be resolved using GitHub. Initially, it was some part of something called Git, but then, you know, GitHub was sort of the web application that that made this happen on the web. It's like super commonly used. And it so happens, so like disregarding all the version control stuff I just said, it so happens that GitHub has this feature where you can host your static pages, aka what we want to do. So that's just like a side effect of this all. But like, in case you were wondering like what is all this stuff, that's what GitHub is. It's like a way for a bunch of people to work on one software project without like running into each other. Sarah Kim, our TA, really loves GitHub, by the way. So just saying. Like nowadays also, it's like almost a kind of modern resume if you're doing software engineering. And the reason for that is like the way it looks is that the more things you do for software, they're called contributions. And the more contributions you give, like there's this sort of map where it says like you made this many contributions on this day, et cetera, et cetera. And like if you make a ton of contributions, then more likely than not, you know what you're doing more than someone who has not that many. And so that's why like people say, show me your GitHub, possibly before they ask you for your resume. Also, the way you would interface with it, and I believe the way that we're going to show you in the hands-on, is that right? No?
No, we use
Are you using the application? Okay, whew. All right, good, because I feel like that'd be like too much info at once. But you can like interface it through your terminal, which is essentially the command line version of your computer. And this logo, by the way, that it uses is the Octocat. It's a cat with 8 tentacles. I'm not sure why, but that's their mascot. Okay, so you're wondering, like, I don't like .github.io at the end of my URL. I just want .com or .org or .net. And there are a bunch of domain services out there, like you know, GoDaddy and whatever. But I'd say, like, ignore all the noise. The one you should go for is Namecheap, just because they're just the simplest to use. And overall, I find that their rates are the best. It's also really compatible with GitHub Pages, which is what we're going to show you how to use. So this, for example, is my URL. I want it to be andyq.in, but of course, my username for GitHub is something else. So the way you would do this, and you can just refer to the slide as reference, just like set these settings in the URL forwarding tab, and you'll have whatever URL you bought on Namecheap to be the URL for your GitHub hosted site. Okay, final portion, last stretch. What are we going to do after web design decal? It's a very good question. There are certainly a lot of things to look into, and the first of which is libraries and frameworks other than jQuery that will make your life easier and better. And the first of which I want to recommend to you is something called Angular. Basically, it just eliminates a lot of the redundancy that you would have when you're writing like a more full-fledged application. The rest you can find out for yourself, really, because like I think you guys have been pretty conditioned right now to like self-discovery in terms of like looking up how things are done just by being in this class. So the next step I would recommend is just check out Angular. It's really awesome. There's also, are you going to talk about Code School? Oh, React. Okay, all right. Yeah, I was going to talk about like also, there's a site called Code School, kind of like a Code Academy type thing, except I think a lot better. And like they have something called Shaping Up with Angular. It's like a class that I believe is free. So if you want to check that out next, that'd be a great option. Something called D3.js. If you ever like read the New York Times and you're looking at one of their graphs and like it's really, really awesome because like you can just hover over things and then suddenly some info comes up that wasn't there before. And like all of a sudden you're like, if you've ever been online, I guess, and you just like found this chart that was like really interactive and you're like, how did they do that? Most likely it was done through D3. So that's another option. If you guys remember when I brought up that race car that was like rendered in the browser, that was built with 3.js. So that's another option. And yeah, there are other things here. I'll just leave this here as reference, but essentially here all this more or less is JavaScript, with the exception of the last thing, which is Twitter Bootstrap. Twitter Bootstrap, by the way, is basically if you're really fast or you really need to get some prototype out there, there's this solution that basically gets you a responsive site with like all the standard things like buttons and photos and whatever. But we're not allowing that for the final project, by the way. So I just want to make that clear now. You're not allowed to use Twitter Bootstrap. But in the case like somehow someone tells you, hey, I need a website in like 2 hours, then probably the best thing to do is just immediately just jump into Bootstrap. Just as a recommendation. This class has also been all about the front end so far. We haven't really talked about how you'd handle things in the back end or store information about your users or anything like that. And so there are back end frameworks too. In particular, there's Django, Ruby on Rails, Node.js, and PHP. So Django uses Python. In case you take 61A at some point in your Cal career, you'll learn some Python there. But what I really want to just sort of push is that like these CS classes are not just for picking up languages, like ever, because really like no one can really tell you what language you'll be using in the future. So really it's just about like in terms of, I'd say like I hope the number one thing you really took from this class is like how to be a good Googler and how to ask the right questions, more so than like what was this class for? It was for HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. But anyway, so yeah, there's backend stuff. CS169 covers this. Also, there are various databases you can use if you want to store stuff like user information. Yeah.
Also, Stack Overflow is a good resource.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's a great point. So in case you haven't already discovered this website already, there's a website called Stack Overflow. It's one word. And basically, if you don't know how to do something and your search results are like weird, like they have nothing to do with web stuff, then basically just add the word Stack Overflow to your Google query just at the end, and more than likely than not, then like what you're looking for will come up. So you learned a bit of JavaScript. And like just sort of like the very, like just skimming the top. But what I really want to emphasize, and this might be like hotly debated, but I think like if you really just needed to know like one language, at least today in this moment, it should probably be JavaScript. And the reason for that is that it's so very compatible and flexible. Like you know, basically you can just enter almost any platform if you like, because it has a JavaScript API, or it can talk using JavaScript. And so obviously on desktop, we've seen that to be true, right? Because that's what we've been doing all semester. And mobile too. Like we haven't talked as much about mobile responsiveness, but like, you know, nowadays like a website that you visit, like Facebook, for instance, on your phone, like since they're really good at this stuff, then like it looks almost as good as their native application. In other words, the Facebook that you download from the App Store, right? Like, or it just feels almost as smooth. Not quite there, but like, you know, it's only going up. And so slowly but surely, like, Prediction is that like the mobile web will like start to really become similar to the native application side of things in terms of speed and like how snappy things are, and then it might be just as good at that point. And then even like sort of fringe fields like virtual reality, like even like those are starting to get web versions. There's something called WebVR currently like under development at the moment, but at some point in the near future you might see that like we have this new web where people are wearing head-mounted displays to experience it. Yeah.
Also, you can you can now program a microcontrollers with JavaScript.
Yeah, that's true.
Hardware.
Yeah. So have you ever heard of Arduino? That originally was programmed in C, but now there's a microcontroller indeed that you can program in JavaScript. So again, like it's just everywhere. And so if there's like one language you really had to learn, I'd say it's JavaScript, because you can do like the most stuff with it. So yeah, there's also something called AJAX, which is basically how you talk between the front end and the back end languages. And if you were to do it all, you'd be what's known as a full stack developer. In other words, you know the entire web stack. And if you want to be this awesome unicorn of a person, then go ahead and try projects like this over winter break, which is coming right up, and you probably could learn a lot in that time. I also wanted to congratulate all of you for making it through this course. You are now officially entry-level front-end web developers, which means that you could put this stuff on your resume. You could say now, like, I officially know HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to all your employers. And now, like, if you were so bold, you could actually go out and intern for some group. It really just anywhere, because like people are always looking for people to make websites for them. So that's officially an option now. You can do freelance programming. You can also find a bunch of open source projects too that you want to work on. But essentially, like, you're there. And here's just some companies that you may have heard of. All of them use JavaScript, by the way, at some place or another. And I won't read through all of these, but yeah, everyone uses JavaScript. It's the scripting language of the web. It's not going anywhere anytime soon. And last of all, like, yeah, thank you guys for being an awesome audience. This was great. All right, enough cheesy. We're gonna do this hands-on. You really want to pay attention to this one, because like this is, again, like your final project depends on it. So here's Tomas and Adam.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hi everyone. So today's hands-on is pretty simple, but I really recommend you guys pay attention because you're gonna do it for your final project. So we're gonna deploy our website on GitHub, which was the application Andy was talking about. So first thing you wanna do is go on github.com, and we're gonna create an account.
I am a unicorn. I am a unicorn.com, gmail.com. I am a unicorn.
Yeah,
No,
make your own, yeah.
Of course. Okay. Okay.
You need one.
Okay.
All right.
You're done.
So
Free.
Yeah, you choose the free plan.
Okay.
And then sign
I will
up.
log in with my own account.
All right.
Oh no! Oh, I'm a unicorn. Oh.
So for GitHub, there's two ways you can use it. You can either use it in your terminal, which is a bit more complicated. I would just recommend downloading the application, which is really user interface friendly. So let's just go ahead and do that and download the application.
Okay, so we go to first do here repositories.
Oh, okay, let's get. We're gonna create a repository.
Is everyone caught up right now? Do you want us to slow down?
Slower.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, when you're done.
Okay.
When you're done, do like this. Okay.
All right, we're gonna move on.
No. Do just 5 of them.
All right.
You need help? He can go help you. Nice. Anybody want help? No? You. Please. Okay. Yes?
All right.
Everybody? Yes? Everybody? Yes?
All right.
Awesome. Okay.
All right, so
New.
we're gonna create a repository, and this is basically a place where you're gonna put your website. And for the repository name, this is really important. You have to type your username.github.io. So make sure the name is exactly this way, because if you put another name for the repository name, it's not gonna give you a website. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So you click on new on the top right.
No, you go to Tomasero, your own username, then go to repositories, and then put new, green button, big green button here. New. Are you here? Yes?
Any questions so far?
Okay.
All right. So yeah, then you create the repository. You can add a description if you want. All right, and so now you should be getting this page, and we're gonna use the desktop application. So you just click on Setup in Desktop.
Here. Green button. Oh, fuck. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
Is anyone here to slow down? Is everyone actually okay? All right, cool.
You already have that.
Okay. Download. Where's your laptop? You're not doing hands-on? Oh. Okay. Open it. And run it. Open. Yes. Continue. Are you here? Okay.
Yeah, we'll give you 2 minutes to download the application so you guys can follow along. Yes, you already made the repo?
Yes. Why?
No, 'cause I gave it,
Let's see. Yeah.
okay. Let's move on.
Yes. Everybody?
Why not? Oh.
Okay. Anybody want help? No? Help?
How's the internet right now?
All good?
Yeah.
All right, so let's log in.
Okay. Oh, nice. Okay. Config. Whose laptop is this? Okay.
All right, so you should be getting this page right now. All right, so now we're gonna link our local folder. We're gonna try and link that to the GitHub repository we made.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Okay, I cannot use terminal. Oh, sorry. Okay.
So create repo. Yeah. Actually, just go. So yeah, just go back to this page where you created the repo, and then click on Setup in Desktop. So now it's gonna create a local folder.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so now what you want to do is you want to put the files you have for your website inside of that folder so that you can upload the files online. So just go in documents.
Okay, I'm gonna like create a new file.
Yeah,
Really fast.
just use Sublime.
Okay. Sorry. Mm.
So yeah, make sure you name your HTML file index.html, and then just put all your files inside of that folder you just created. And then on the GitHub application, it should show you the files you put in the folder. So right now, Tomas put index.html, and it showed up in the application. Now the next step we want to do is we're going to upload this folder to our GitHub account. So we're going to click on the plus button, and then commit.
Message.
So, yeah, you need to add a little description.
Commit and sync.
So now I just uploaded to his GitHub account, and then you can access your website using the URL, which was your username.github.io. Now it usually takes about 15 to 20 minutes to upload, so don't panic if you get an error message. Any questions?
Yes.
Yes.
How did you upload the files again?
You could.
How did you initially put them into this little window?
You drag them
How did you drag them?
in the folder, and that's
Yeah,
it.
make sure you put them in the folder in your local desktop. Yeah.
Yes.
What was the step right before this?
Here.
Do the whole thing again.
Okay.
All right.
So let me modify. Okay. Yeah.
Just go in documents.
Okay. Now I go to here. Oh, it's in red. This means that it's a new thing that I added. I put here in adding, then added great success, and then commit and sync, and it's up. Yes.
Where did you save your HTML file?
We're gonna save it in the folder here. We can see documents slash.
The folder, I have this HTML file on my computer.
Yes,
Where do I need to save that HTML file?
in the folder.
To get uploaded to GitHub?
In the folder that you previously cloned from GitHub.
Yeah, so when you clicked on Setup in Desktop on the GitHub, you created a folder for you, and you need to put that HTML inside the folder.
Yes,
Does it matter where you clone the folder and like can you move it around after you save it there?
don't move it around.
Yeah.
okay,
yeah,
she knows best, so
yeah.
listen to her. Any other question? Please ask. That you can move it around.
Yeah.
Any other question?
All right. Well, good luck with your final projects.
I just wanted to mention one little gotcha from the GitHub thing, and that is that you have to make sure that your index.html is on the outside of your folder. So what I mean by that is like if this is your folder, you can actually go to it right now. But basically, you have to have index.html on the outside. You can't be like buried in something or it can't be nested in another folder. It has to be like on the outside. Otherwise, GitHub pages won't recognize what to do. Yeah. So you could put your extra pages on the same level. So also right out there, you could potentially have a pages folder if you wanted to, where all the other pages go into the pages folder. But index has to be on the outside. That's just the one sort of requirement, and it has to be called index.html. I believe those are all the gotchas with using GitHub pages that I can think of. Yeah.
I don't see you like convinced, so we'll do it again once more, and please pay attention. So I will go to settings and delete this. Tomasero.github.io. I understand the consequences. Okay, a new repository.
Make sure the name is username.github.io. If you don't do that, it's not going to work.
Okay, create. Yes. Everybody. 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 Nice. Nice. Okay, set up in desktop. Launch application.
So when you set up in desktop, it's going to create a folder for you. And that's where you need to put all your content.
Then do a sync, a update 1, and then commit and sync. Oh. Okay, yeah. And sync. Yes?
Could you go to the URL?
It takes about 20 minutes to upload, so it's not going to show up right now.
You have a green button? Where? On what thingy? On the web or on the app?
On the app.
On the app. So you don't have a green thingy? Have you like clicked on the thingy?
I don't have the thing.
You have a thingy.
Is that wrong?
Do you have something here?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, she's there. She can help you. Yes.
Did you drag the whole folder into this, or did you go in like the folder that has your actual HTML and CSS stuff? Did you go into that folder, copy everything, and then drag it in, or did you drag that whole folder and put it in this?
What you do is you create a name here, add the name of it, and then you look it in your local computer, and then like select it. And it's
Select the outer folder? Select
yes,
the whole folder?
yes.
Yeah, so as Andy was saying, make sure like you don't have another folder nested in it. Like inside the folder that GitHub creates, you need to have your index.html in there.
Okay, so if you have like a folder that says like final project, don't put that folder.
Yeah, copy the stuff that's inside the folder rather than just putting the folder exactly. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Any other question? No? Are you sure? Okay, done.
All right, thank you guys.
Okay.
Just so we're going to take a break. Yeah. All right, so we're just going to take a quick 10-minute break. If you have any questions about the GitHub thing, we'll be walking around. So yeah.
reason
Okay, guys, we're gonna get started. Hey guys, this is the last design lecture of the semester. We're gonna we're gonna pick up from where we left off last week on animations. This is gonna be the second animations lecture. Last week we talked about some a little bit complicated stuff, but pretty interesting animations, like transforms, two-state animations like popovers, set timeouts, how to make sure that your code executes after some delays, and some three-state animations like motorbox. And today we're gonna do some really cool things like animations that happen upon user scroll. So that includes something like sticky navigations, position fixed sticky navigations, and some parallax animations that we're gonna do on scroll. And at the very end, we're gonna do some cubic-based zero functions, which will make your animations look a lot sleeker than a regular or linear animations. So before I begin, do you have any questions from regarding animations in general that you guys came across with in homework or last lecture or something like that? Okay, so today's main topic is going to be scroll animations. These are pretty useful because scrolling animations are used very ubiquitously because scroll actions have least cost of action. And I think I talked about this during my user experience lecture, that there are three main user actions: hover, click, and scroll. And of those three actions that you can take, scrolling has least cost of action. And based on these scroll animations, there are two main types. One is scroll animations that happen on waypoint, and another is scroll animations that happen on scroll. And we're gonna learn what these types of animations are, and I'm gonna show you an example for each one of these topics. So the first is trigger on waypoint. It's very, very similar to the two-state transitions that we did before in last week. You know how I think for our popover, when the user clicks on a button, it goes to the next state. When the user clicks on a button, popover shows, and so on and so forth. Trigger on waypoint is very similar, except that here the transition happens when the user reaches some point in a web page. So as the user scrolls down, when the user reaches some section, some content, or some button, this animation will take place. So the logic is, when a user reaches a certain point in page, make a transition from original state to an active state. So the main difference for trigger on waypoint animation is to detect when a user reaches a certain point in page. So an example of a trigger on waypoint would be a website called Circle. Show you the website. So for this website, as I scroll, when I reach a certain point, when I reach the bottom of the page for this section, the animation takes place. The text shows up, scroll down, it fades in, scroll down, another thing fades in, and so on and so forth. So as I scroll and as I reach certain point in the web page, a new animation takes place for some elements. So this would be a trigger on waypoint type of an animation. So how do you achieve this effect? I think Andy mentioned this briefly. There's a really cool plugin called jQuery Waypoints that allows you to achieve this effect. So what jQuery Waypoints does is it allows you to detect when a user has reached certain element as the user scrolls. So for this code, for example, what happens is when I do hashtag content.waypoints alert exclamation mark. So when the user scrolls past the content section of the web page, an exclamation mark will appear. So let me give you a demo of that. So cool. I'm going to do a content waypoint alert. So now if I scroll, so the content section is over here. The content. So the content is everything from here. Everything from the navigation bar, that's our content section. And what we did with the JavaScript code is that when the user scrolls past the content, so that is when the content reaches the top of the page, an exclamation mark will appear. Yeah. Move over. Okay. There you go. So for here, as I scroll, when the content section reaches the top of the page, an alert box will appear. So that's what waypoints does. Any questions regarding waypoints? Any questions regarding waypoints? All right. So this is really useful for achieving an effect called sticky nav. A sticky nav is a navigation bar that starts in the middle or the bottom of the page, like the website that I showed you. The navigation starts from the bottom of the page. And when the top bar reaches the top of the page, it sticks to the top. So here's let me give you a demo of a sticky nav. Over here, I'm gonna refresh. So when the navigation bar reaches the top of the page, it's gonna stick. It's gonna stick there. And if I scroll back up, it unsticks. So this is a cool effect, and the logic is we first detect whether the content reaches the top, and when the content reaches the top, we're gonna do some animation / transition to this navigation bar. So I think in my last lecture, I talked about CSS states, and everything in animation is going from one state to another state, and you do that by representing a state using a class, and you're just doing an add class and move class for that CSS class. And we can do the similar thing for a sticky nav. So now navigation starts out on the very bottom of the page, and it's scrollable. So usually a scrollable element is position relative. So I set the content surrounding it to position relative. And I set the top property to calc 100% minus 60 pixels. What this does is it pushes the content down by 100%. And if you just push it down by 100%, the navigation bar will be invisible because you pushed it down all the way. The navigation bar's height is 60 pixels. So we still want the bottom bar, the navigation bar, to be visible. So we push it back up by 60 pixels. So that's why we do calc 100% minus 60 pixels. And when the when the navigation bar sticks to the top, we obviously want to make it sticky, which means that it doesn't go away even if the user scrolls. And for that, we use a CSS property called position fixed. And because it sticks to the top, it's going to be top 0 pixels. Any question regarding the CSS properties for the sticky bar? Any questions? Okay. So to detect the waypoint using waypoints, you're gonna have to do the dot waypoints, and this function takes in a value called direction. So the direction value is either gonna be down or up. If the direction is down, this means that the user is scrolling down, and if the direction is up, the user is scrolling up. So the logic is, if the user is scrolling down and the navigation bar reaches the top of the page, you want to make it stick. And if the user is scrolling up and the content reaches the top, you want to make it unsticky. So the way you make it sticky is you just add a class called sticky, represented by position fixed, top 0 pixels to this navigation bar. So let me show you how that works. So in our CSS, I have a class called sticky that has a position called fixed and top value of 0 pixels. And what I'm going to do is if I'm scrolling down and the content reaches the top of the page, I'm going to add the class called sticky. And if I'm scrolling up, then I'm going to move the class called sticky. So to give you an example, if I refresh, inspect element, by default, it's not gonna have anything, so it is scrollable, and it starts off on the bottom of the page. And I reach the top of the page, the waypoint triggers, and the class called sticky got added to this navigation. And the sticky, because the sticky has position fixed, and top 0 pixels, it's going to stick to the top and it's not going to move. And when I scroll back up again, I'm going to remove the class called sticky, so it's going to be scrollable again. Any questions regarding the sticky navigation? All right. So this is the code. Content waypoints, if direction down, add class sticky, otherwise remove class sticky. And yeah, it's pretty straightforward. This is a very, very easy transition. It's pretty much the same thing as a popover, except that the difference is the event fires if the event happens when on scroll event when you reach a certain point in web page instead of on click or on hover. So trigger on waypoints is pretty easy compared to trigger on scroll. Trigger on scroll is a very different kind of animation. It is also very performance heavy. If you have too many kinds of this trigger on scroll type of animation, it's going to slow down your web page dramatically. It's because every time you scroll, this event happens. For waypoints, it only happens when you reach a certain point in your website. Whereas in trigger on scroll, it happens every single time you scroll. And as you scroll, this is going to happen, this event is going to fire 100 times even, which I'm going to show you a demo in a bit. So the logic is, it's kind of hard to explain, but is using a sentence. It's like when the user scrolls, make a gradual transition from the original state to the final state. And let me show you an example of that. So there's a website called Coin. I don't know if they launched, if they shipped their product or not. But so what this website does is as I scroll down, the credit card will move. As I scroll down, instead of making the transition like right at the instant, it makes a gradual transition as I scroll. Comes to close, goes down, slides the credit card machine and everything. And everything happens on scroll. So as you can see, the animation does not happen at that instant. The animation happens gradually as the user scrolls. So this would be an example of a trigger on scroll animation. So trigger on scroll, and before I get to the actual animation part, I'm going to explain to you some really useful jQuery functions to achieve this effect. The first function that I'm going to talk about is scroll. So scroll is a lot like your event binder jQuery functions like click, hover, and those kind of stuff. It's usually bound to a dollar window. You don't have to worry about anything else. You usually use .scroll on the window element. So you do dollar window .scroll. And what's going to happen is every time you scroll, this function is going to execute. And usually what happens is every time you scroll down using a mouse wheel, it's going to fire 100 plus times. So let me give you an example. Let's say I'm on this website, and I'm going to let me use this website. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a JavaScript. $window.scroll function alert this thing. So what's going to happen is every time I scroll, exclamation, not alert. I shouldn't do alert. It's going to be really, really painful. Console.log exclamation mark. You will see why alert will be really, really painful. So console.log exclamation. And now if I, just to show you, if I scroll, you see this number on the left? That designates how many times exclamation mark appears. So it happened, as I scroll, it happened like 200 times, 250 times, and so on and so forth. And you'll see why this is really cool in my next demo. So .scroll, basically, whatever inside that function happens every time the user scrolls. Another really cool function is called offset. So what offset does is offset gives you two values, top and left. And usually you use it for offset.top. And what offset.top gives you is it tells you how far an element is away from the top of the page. So in this example, let's say the page is the green section and you have an element. And an element is 120 pixels away from the very top of the page. So what I do is $element.offset.top. What this is going to give me is it's going to give me 120 pixels because it is 120 pixels away from the top of the page. So here's a demo of this. So I want to know how far this navigation bar is from the very top of the page. So what I would do is console. I go to it was nav.offset.top, and it gives me 741. So what this means is that this navigation bar is 741 pixels away from the very top of the page. That is this very top of the page right here. Any questions regarding .scroll or .offset top? Yeah.
Is it about offset top of performance heavy to do because it can calculate off the scroll?
It's not. So anything that's anything that goes inside .scroll is performance intensive. .offset.top by itself is not that performance heavy, but anything that goes inside .scroll right here, that's going to be performance heavy because whatever is inside that line is going to execute 100 times per second. Any questions? Yeah.
How is offset different from something like
.position.top. Yeah, I remember. Let me. Not quite sure. Let me. Was it this? Gives me 0. Let's see. 815. 0. 0. 758. It's interesting. I'm gonna have to look into this. I'm not sure. Does anyone have an answer to this? Like, what's the difference between position.top versus offset.top? Hamza?
Yeah, I believe it's relative to the parent.
Relative to the parent.
Yeah,
Okay.
Position, but offset will just relative to the window.
Yeah. So offset.top is relative to the entire document. So how far this element is from the very top of the document, whereas position.top is how far this element is away from the parent, I guess. Okay. Any other questions regarding offset and scroll? So this very last function that I want to go over is scroll top. So what scroll top gives you is it gives you an information about how far the user has scrolled. So in this graphic right here, the gray area designates how far the user has scrolled. So in this case, the user has scrolled 300 pixels. So if I do $window.scroll top, it's going to give me 300. Again, so .scroll top, just like scroll, it's usually bound to $window element. So let me give you an example of that. Over here, I'm going to refresh. It's going to be, I'm going to write a very similar function, .scroll function. I'm going to do a console.log of, instead of just alerting out the exclamation, I'm going to alert out how far the user has scrolled. So if I scroll, it's going to give me, again, it happens like instantly. So it happens like, this is executing 100 times per second. So as I scroll, it gives me, I've scrolled 134 pixels, and as I scroll, it's going to, a lot of calculations and stuff like that. So you can see why this would be so performance heavy, because this would fire every single time I scroll. Okay. Any questions regarding .scroll top? Okay. So now we're going to get to the really cool part, the parallax scrolling. How many of you have heard of parallax scrolling? So yeah, can anyone tell me what parallax scrolling is in your definition? There are many different definitions, and there are many variations of parallax, so yeah.
Based on the scroll, you can change the velocity and movements of different objects on the page. So you can have some objects move faster than others as you scroll.
The answer that Kevin gave was that as you scroll, you manually adjust the velocity at which some other elements move. So for example, if I scroll an element, usually the element would scroll according to how much you scroll. But what if you want to make an element go slower than your scroll movement, or what if you want to make an element go faster than your scroll movement? So that would be one definition of a parallax. So usually a parallax is achieved with a background. So what happens is, as the user scrolls, I can have the background go up a little bit slowly than the user's scrolling rate, or I could move the background. I could make the background go a little bit faster, or I could make the background even zoom in as the user scrolls. So the keyword here is that something happens to the background, whether it's moving or zooming in as the user scrolls. So let me give you an example of a parallax. So as I scroll, you see how the background is going to slowly zoom in and it's going to go slowly up. To give you a more distinctive transition, I'm going to take out the zoom and I'm just going to make it like go up dramatically. So as I scroll, didn't work. As I scroll, the background will go up as I scroll, but it's going up at a different rate as I scroll. So this would be one example of a parallax, or I can make it go zoom in by adding this zoom adding a zoom variation. So as I scroll, the background will slowly zoom in. So this is again one example of a parallax. There are so many different kinds of parallax, but in today's lecture, we're going to do a zoom plus translate. So parallax is going to be really complicated. So I'm going to go as slowly as possible. I'm going to do this like graphical explanation, but it's going to be, you understand it better when I start the demo. So you have two components. You have the content and you have the background. The background is position fixed, which means that it's not going to move unless I actually move it using JavaScript. And the content is position relative, so that it's going to start from the very bottom of the web page. So to represent the states, the background is going to have a position fixed because it's not going to move unless I actually tell it to move. And because it's a background, it's going to take up the entire width and the entire height, and the content will be position relative and top 80% of the browser height. So what we have so far is that without the JavaScript, if I take out this JavaScript, the content will just cover up the background. As I scroll, the background will not move because background is position fixed, and as I scroll, the content will just cover up the background. Any questions regarding what we have so far regarding the CSS? Okay, so our goal is to make sure that as I scroll, we want to move the background in some ways. As I scroll, I want to move the background. So how does the background move? So all it takes is to, I think I mentioned last week that to adjust an element's location in CSS animation is to adjust its translate value of its transform property. So what we want to do is we want to do a translate Y so that the background moves upwards as the user scrolls. And at the very end, we want the background to be shifted slightly upwards. So at the end of the transition, what we want to have is we want to do a translate Y negative 120 pixels so that it's shifted upwards. Any questions regarding moving the background? So if you were to do a waypoint style of a transition, what I would do is when the user reaches a certain point in the web page, I would just do translate Y negative 120 pixels. But we don't want that. What we want is we want this transition to happen as the user scrolls. So in the original state, it's going to be, if I use, this is a pretty bad graphic, but as I scroll, let's say I move 150 pixels. Without the parallax, the content will just cover the background. But with the parallax of a final state of 120 pixels, as I scroll 150 pixels, the background will be shifted upwards by 120 pixels. So in animation, so usually what we do in CSS transition is you do a linear 0.5 seconds to achieve the transition, but we kind of don't want that in parallax because this is an animation that happens every single time the user scrolls, which means the animation will happen 100 plus times per second, and usually the CSS transitions happen like 0.1, usually takes 0.1 to 0.5 seconds to take effect. So the logic is, when the user scrolls, measure how far a user has scrolled from the top of the page, and using that, find what percent of the animation is complete, and change the CSS value accordingly. So there are two waypoints. You have a starting point and you have an ending point. And when the user reaches the end of the waypoint, we are going to, the animation will stop. An animation will take place as long as the user is between the starting point and the ending point. So what we want to do is we want to measure the progress of the animation as the user scrolls. So the progress of the animation is measured by how far the user has scrolled. So if I scored 480 pixels and the ending point is 800 pixels, that means that the animation is 60% complete because 480 divided by 800 is 60%. So you can detect how far an animation has completed by measuring just how much the user has scrolled. Any questions regarding this? It's gonna sound really complicated unless I actually do the demo. Okay, so what you would do is this is why I mentioned the three functions before I started this section. So it would be the percent of animation completed would be however much the user has scrolled, which is detected by window.scrollTop, divided by waypoint.offset.top, which gives you how far an element is away from the page. So the formula is different case by case, but it usually is a form of how far a user has scrolled divided by the location of the waypoint. Question? What do you mean non-linear effect? Ooh.
So it's kind of like a Bezier for
That's interesting. I actually never have done that. You could, so like, I mean, you could mess with the formula to achieve that effect, but I don't exactly know how you would do that, yeah.
Right now the ratio is like 1 to 1.
1 to 1, yeah, yeah. But you could change the ratio a bit, yep, as the user scrolls. So what we want is that at first, the background is at its original position, so that it would be translate y 0 pixels. And when the animation completes, you want the background to be shifted up by 120 pixels. So when I'm 60% through the animation, the location should be 120 times 0.6, so that would be negative 72 pixels. Any questions regarding this? So it would be that at any given point during the course of the transition, the location value would be negative 120 times progress, which is anywhere from 0 to 1. So I really, really think that we need a demo to describe this effect. Go to my code. So what I do is it's going to happen every time the user scrolls. So whenever a user scrolls, what I want to do is I want to detect how far I have scrolled using .scrollTop. So that is offset y. And we want our animation to end when the user has when the user has reached this point, we want the animation to end. So I think from what I remember, it was 801 pixels, which is gonna be the same as content.offset.top. And we can measure how far the progress of the animation by dividing the offset y by the waypoint. So let me just do a console.log to show you this effect. So as I scroll, it's gonna spit out gibberish. But what it means is that it's gonna be anywhere from 0 to 1. 1 means it's completed. 0 means it's at its starting point. And as I scroll, it's gonna be 0.05. This means that the animation is 5% complete. Zoom in. 5% complete, 10% complete, 12% complete, and then when I reach the very top, it's gonna be 1, which means that the animation should be complete by this point. So now it's at 90% complete and so on and so forth. Any questions regarding measuring the progress? Yeah. So it's negative value because you know how in Mac, if you scroll all the way to the top, it kind of jumps. That's why you get a negative value. Possibly. Oh yeah, it could. Yeah. Yep. So now what we want to do is we want to change the location of the background depending on how the progress of the animation. So what I do is, let's just do it for the translate. So the translate code is this. So as I scroll, the background is shifted, will be shifted up by 120 pixel when the animation completes. So it'll be negative 120 times progress to get the current location of the background at any given time during the transition. So for here, what I would do is now what I can do is I can just change the CSS value to be whatever the value of translate is. So what I do is background of CSS transform equals translate y. We're going to shift it up by whatever that is. So negative 120 times progress. Any question regarding this code? I do some string manipulation. Translate y. So whatever this is going to be the same as negative 72, negative 24, et cetera, depending on the progress of the animation. So now if I do this and go back to my original code, it's going to slowly shift up as I scroll because, let me show you the actual code elements. Wow. So here is, over here is, it starts off at 0 pixels, but as I scroll, the y value will change as I scroll. And when I reach the end of the transition, it's going to be negative 120. And that's how you achieve the parallax scroll. Any questions regarding parallax? This is everything to the parallax so far. So a zoom would be a very similar effect. Instead of translate y, you would manipulate the scale value as the user scrolls, depending on the progress of the animation. So putting it all together, we have this. All the code is available online, so I highly encourage you to try it at home. So the final part to this lecture is cubic Bezier functions. So far, all of your transitions has been pretty, it happens, but it's kind of boring because all your animations has been linear. You just go from one state to another in this like linear format. But this is not how it works with the way objects move in real life. When objects move in real life, there's friction. Like objects kind of move slowly in the beginning, it kind of accelerates, and when it comes to a stop, it decelerates to a slow, steady stop. And there's also elasticity. So objects, sometimes for a rubber band, it expands outwards and then it springs back inward. So we can kind of simulate how objects move in real life in physics using cubic Bezier functions in CSS. So what cubic Bezier function does is it allows you to control the progression of your animation in your transition. So in this example, what happens is the transition will happen fast in the beginning, according to y-axis, and then it goes slowly, and then it happens fast again. And you can define the CSS cubic Bezier functions by using a transition, and it goes inside the easing property of your transition. So usually in your CSS, you do transition linear 0.4 seconds, and linear 0.4 seconds, it's the same thing as cubic Bezier 0011. And you don't have to memorize all these like numbers and functions, and it's not a math class. I just use it too, so I don't even know the underlying logic. So yeah, and the effect is the same. Cubic Bezier 0011 is the same thing as linear 0.4 seconds. But the trick to cubic Bezier is that you can tweak these numbers inside the cubic Bezier to achieve different kinds of effects. So I'm going to give you some really, really cool cubic Bezier functions that I use really often. One is friction. So again, in real life, objects move slowly and then accelerate quickly and then decelerate before coming to a stop. And this cubic Bezier function achieves that effect. Another thing is elastic. So just like how you in rubber band, it kind of like it expands outwards and then it springs back up, back inward. So this achieves that effect. And I think that the best way to show you the cubic Bezier is through a demo. I have a Bezier. I already have it open. So now I have 3 cars. I have a linear Bezier function, friction function, and an elastic function. For a linear, it just goes linearly. It just happens at a steady speed. But for friction, it's gonna go slowly in the beginning, accelerate, and then come to a stop. Elastic is gonna go to the left a bit, and then it's gonna go that way. Elastic, friction, and linear. Let's try to compare these three at once. Move all like this. So, so all the code behind these cubic Bezier functions are available on the slide. So I highly encourage you to use some of these cubic Bezier functions for your transitions instead of using the old boring linear functions. Lastly, I want to give you some ways we use the animations in the startup that I just launched yesterday called Iris. So in our Iris landing page, we use a combination of this friction and elastic. So as I scroll, when I reach this page, it springs back up. It pops up using my elastic cubic Bezier function. And I scroll down again, elastic. Same thing for this. It kind of shows like a pop effect, and it really draws users' attention to this effect. And for my sign and motor box, I didn't use a linear function. I used like kind of like a friction function for this. So if I click this, it shoots up. It starts slowly, accelerate, and then comes to a slow stop. Click on sign up. Again, friction. So here's are some ways I use animations and cubic Bezier functions in my startup Iris. I just launched yesterday, so I highly encourage you to check it out. It's basically it's a place for Berkeley students to share and discover ideas with people with similar interests. We partner with Berkeley Byte and other publications to share their ideas, so check it out if you have time. So that concludes the design section of Web Design DeCal. It's been a great ride. We tried a lot of cool things this semester, like the webcast, the portal, and all. And it's been a really, it's been a blast with you all this semester. So thank you. All right. So I think we have 10 minutes for hands-on by Hamza. We need to do a second. Can we do a second? Yeah. Do you want to use yours? Yeah. Okay.
Okay, if you guys can just go and download the hands-on from the portal. It's under lecture and animations 2 and hands-on. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, okay. All right, so for this website, hands-on, we're going to be creating, like what Sean was just describing, a parallax kind of website. So basically what we have is, I don't know why I keep doing blog websites, but a blogging website, 5 blog posts, and we want to kind of animate the images of the blog posts so that they seem like they're moving at a different speed than the rest of the page. I know there are no images right now, but actually there are images right now. So if we go to the web inspector, and we look at the structure of this page, we'll notice that we first have a container, just like every other website should. And then we have our navbar, nothing too special. It's 60 pixels in height, so just keep that in mind. And then we have these blog titles, and then we have a blog image for each blog. And the way we did it in this example is we set the images using a background image CSS property. So you can actually do that rather than having an image tag. You can just set a background image. And the difference is that with this kind of a implementation, you can specify like how you want to set the image. So you can set it to be like a cover, so that it covers the whole div, or just in the center. There are many different parameters that it takes. For this example, we're going to be using the cover. So yeah, basically there's an image right now, but we just need to give it some height. So in your CSS style sheet, the first thing, let's just get through the CSS really quick because we want to focus on the JavaScript. So we'll just update the headers. So they're all under a class called, they're all under a class called blog post. So let's give each blog post a height of 100 pixels, and let's give it a padding of 20 pixels. Okay, I think that's good enough. Notice how each blog post is 140 pixels in height. So just keep that in mind too. We're going to be using these numbers for the jQuery. And then inside each blog post we have a header. So let's give the header some styles, some font size of 36 pixels, font weight to make it look like a header, 500. I think that's good enough. And then for the subtitles, yeah, I'm just rushing through the CSS. I want to get to the JavaScript part. For the subtitles, we're just going to have a font size of 20 pixels, an opacity of 0.6. So nothing too complicated, just basic styling. And now we need to give the actual images some height. So notice how the images are under a class called parallax, and we're just going to give the parallax some height. So change this to dot parallax and give each one a height of 400 pixels. And notice how the images now show up. Next we want to do is we want to set these images to be the size of the entire div. So basically there's this thing called background size. So background size, and to do that you just say cover. So now it just spans out the entire div. And to achieve this parallax effect, we kind of want to have the images be positioned fixed while they're in view, and then we want to animate them so that we drag them upwards slowly. We'll talk about this later, but so we want to set them to be background position of fixed. So background position fixed. Wait. Oh, sorry, I didn't even know. Okay. Wait, what is this? Background attachment. Sorry, it's called background attachment. Fixed, and then finally background. I had a cheat sheet, but I left it in my bag. Background. What is it? What was the last one? I forgot. Is anyone on the document? There's one more style that I need to apply here. Well, whatever. So basically, all those styles, we need to add them. So let's just copy it to our style sheet. Control-L, Command-C. And we'll go to our style sheet and paste them in here. And yeah. So now they should all stay. Thank you. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Oh, background repeat. Oh, we can screw that one. Okay. So that's why I didn't remember it. Okay, so let's move on to the JavaScript part. So as I said before, we want to kind of animate these images by dragging them upwards. So actually, let's take a look at what this website looks like right now. So as you start to scroll, notice how the images keep changing. They kind of like get changed with the titles. Does that make sense? But they're all position fixed because I set that attribute. So it's already pretty cool. But we want to achieve the parallax effect, right? We want to sort of drag these images upwards as we scroll. So let's do that in JavaScript. Okay. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to define this function called parallax. And inside that function, we want to know where we are on the page. So we want to know what scroll position we're at. So we're going to declare a variable called scroll position. And then we're going to set it, to get the scroll position, we need to do this thing, get the scroll top. So basically it tells us how far we are from the top of the page. And the way we're going to drag these images upwards is we're going to be modifying the background position of each image. So remember how we set the background image to be the image that we specified? And now we want to modify the background position. So we're going to be changing all the images. So we're going to add this to the parallax class, which are the images. And we're going to be modifying some CSS. So we use a CSS function. And then we just say background position. And we want to specify it to be, so we're not touching the x coordinate, right? We're keeping it the way it is, and by default it's at 0. So we're going to keep the 0, okay? And background position takes in an x position and a y position. So 0, and then we add. Oh, this is a problem. Okay, 0, and then we add the space to enter the y position. And then we want to shift it upwards, so we need to add a negative y value, right? So we want to shift it up by negative scroll position times 0.1. I know these numbers seem kind of random, but basically it's like a small fraction of how high you are from the page, or how low you are from the page, from the top of the page. So 0.1 scales that factor down a little bit, and finally we just add the pixel thing at the end so that it knows it's a pixel value. Okay, so now we declared the function, but nothing's going to change if we just declare a function, right? We need to call it. Oh, sorry. This is so annoying. Is that good? Okay, so we declared a function, right? But we need to call it somewhere. And when do we want to call this function? When do we want to trigger this function? Depending on what? When we click, when we hover, when we scroll, right? So we want this to happen as we scroll. So we need to declare another function called window, or event listener, I guess. Scroll function. What the hell? Okay. Scroll. Window, scroll function. Okay. Yeah, so I think that's right. And basically we just call the function. And that should fix it. So notice how now the images are kind of moving upwards as we scroll down at a slower speed than these blog titles. That's cool, right? Okay, so we don't have enough time to, I was gonna add another feature where basically as we reach the end of the image fades out of view. But we don't have enough time to do that. I'm just gonna show you the code real quick. So this is the code here. Wait, I know it's a lot more complicated. I only had 10 minutes. Yeah, you can look at it on your own time. But I'll just show you what it does. It's in the instructions how to do it. It's actually, I gave you the whole code at the end. So what it looks like is this. Oh. So as you scroll, the previous image fades out of view. You move to the next image, it fades out of view again. Yeah, and it keeps doing that until the end. Yeah, so that's the effect that I was going for. You guys should check out the instruction. I wrote it all out there for you. Yeah, thank you for being a great class. Are we doing the word of the day? Yeah, okay. Yeah, so the word of the, whatever it's called, is there.